Okay. Welcome, super secret agent trainees, to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have a special treat. We have Kimberly Arcand. She is a PhD, and she's had a long list of things which we're going to go through, but she's going to share her journey with us in STEM. So thank you, Kim, for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much. It's so great to be here. And I'm excited to hear what kind of questions everybody has for me later.
Okay, so tell us about your childhood.
Well, I actually grew up loving science from the time that I was very young. Like I remember being in preschool and wanting to be a doctor and a nurse. And then I wanted to be an astronaut. And then my parents took me to like an amusement park. And I realized I cannot really handle rides. My stomach is not so great. I don't know if any of you are great on like roller coasters and all that, but I can't do it. So then I just started thinking, what else could I be? And I was interested in a lot of different stuff, learning about the environment, helping animals, helping people. I just really love the idea of science. But eventually I found my way into biology and then computer science and then astronomy and working for a NASA mission.
Okay, so tell us about your passions and hobbies as a child and if you had a dream job back then.
I was very, very, very shy as a kid, like hide behind my mom kind of shy. So I was pretty introverted. I tended to like things like reading books. That was my favorite. I liked puzzles. I liked doing like math puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, that kind of thing. But I also grew up in a somewhat rural area. So I liked being outside and just playing in the yard and I did definitely make friends, but I made friends slowly, and I didn't like to hang out with a ton of people at once. But I really thought I would do something. I don't know. I wanted to like save the world when I was a kid. I kind of still do, even though I'm not. And so I really liked the idea of science as a way to help save the world.
Okay, so at what point did you hear about the word STEM? And was it when you were younger or recently?
Much older. I've been working in STEM now for over 25 years. And honestly, I don't know if I heard the term until I was like well into my adulthood, already working in a STEM job. But for me, it's really come to signify a group of work, a type of work that is a way to make a difference. It is a way to have an impact. It's a way to answer questions and solve puzzles or find the next set of questions to ask. So for me, STEM is all about asking questions, hopefully answering them, but having a lot of fun along the way.
Okay, so tell us about your journey now. So you started at the University of Rhode Island in biology and pre-med, I saw something about. And then you went to Harvard and you did computer science, and then you went to Brown and you did public humanities, and then you went to the University of Otago and you got a PhD. So tell us all about that journey.
Yeah, it sounds a little weird hearing it all listed. But you know what my journey I think is all about is I just love learning. That's it. At the end of the day, I just love learning in all different kinds of forms. I love being in school, but I also just like learning on my own. I love being out in the world and learning things. And so all of those steps maybe don't sound very connected, but each step was about learning something new and trying out something different and seeing what I liked and what I was good at. So I started out in biology, molecular biology, thinking maybe I'd be a doctor or work in medicine or medical research or something like that. And then I felt like I was actually pretty terrible at molecular biology. I failed a genetics class and I just felt like, ugh, this isn't for me. And so I wandered over to the computer science department at my local university, and they were very welcoming. And that's when I kind of found the place where I thought, yeah, I can do this. I can make a difference here. And that moment kind of led to a string of different things that I would try, all related to this idea of taking scientific information, figuring out stories of science, stories of the universe in my case, and figuring out how to tell those stories, how to translate that scientific information into something else, something that we could learn from, something we could do something with, something to be created. And all of the other things that came along the way were just different steps on becoming an expert in how we tell stories of the universe, whether that's through creating images, whether that's through creating 3D models of things like exploded stars, or whether that's creating the sound of a black hole, whatever it might be. It's a string of choices that was just all about learning.
Okay, this is all fascinating. And I think the thing that I'm stuck on is the computer science. Like, did you have any exposure to that before you decided that? Or like how did this happen? Did you have a mentor? Like, tell us more.
I did not have a lot of exposure because I grew up in the 80s. The computers were not everywhere yet. We didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't have a lot of exposure to like coding camps or anything like that. I don't even know if they had that back then. So it kind of came out of the blue. In college, I had to work a job to help support myself, and it was working for a professor in like economics, and he needed me to build a web page, and this would have been like 1994, perhaps. And I had to learn how to code to build a web page, and just learning HTML, just learning like those basic, commands and that basic syntax. I was like, oh, this is fun. I can learn how to code and make stuff. This is awesome. What else can I do with this? And that was a really important spark. So sometimes you never know where an experience is going to lead you, whether it's a failure, whether it's a job that seems completely unrelated to whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a book you're reading, a person you have a conversation with. You never know which of those little Easter eggs, right, is going to end up in your basket that you can do something really fun with later. And I kind of like that about this journey in life, right? It's all about collecting all those Easter eggs or all the different crayons in your crayon box and figuring out like what kind of drawing can you make with all those different crayons.
That's so true. I think it's like really you're connecting the dots. So then you taught computer science at the University of Rhode Island. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. I did that for a few semesters, just teaching the basics on how to use computers, how to start coding, how to use things like Word and Excel, basic kinds of, word processing and spreadsheet kind of work, basic like hardware questions, software questions, that kind of thing. And that's fun because honestly, you don't know something well until you teach it. If you have to teach it, then you learn so much more, which is also kind of great.
That's so true. I had to experience that too because I actually learned how to code here in elementary school in LA back in the 80s with a female computer science teacher that she taught us Fortran on an Apple IIc. And then I totally forgot about that because I went into my journey of being in toys and all this stuff. And now when we started WhizGirls Academy, I started teaching. So I totally agree. Okay, so computer science at University of Rhode Island. And then what happened next?
Then I saw a job opportunity for a NASA mission, and it wasn't that far. It was up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was down in Rhode Island at the time, so like an hour away. And I'm like, I think I could do that because I had the combination of science skills. I had taken physics, I had taken chemistry, I had statistics under my belt. I had a lot of knowledge. And then I had the computer science, and that's what they needed. They needed coding, essentially. That's what I was starting out doing, just coding. And so I took a chance, even though I didn't know anything about astronomy at the time, besides like some stars in the night sky, and had a fantastic interview with someone who would become a fantastic boss and mentor. And yeah, then I learned everything I could about astronomy, and it set me on a whole other path. And I just kept going to school, learning more. Learning through my work, learning through asking questions, learning through reading, learning through watching other people give talks. And then, 25 years later, still here.
That's awesome. So you're still at NASA, but you're doing something as well with the Smithsonian?
Yeah. So the telescope I work for is called NASA's Chandrasekhar Observatory, but it's operated for NASA by the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. So it's a interesting mixture of NASA and the Smithsonian side of things, which makes it a lot of fun to be able to have two completely different organizations funded by the U.S. government to be able to work with, engage with, and be a part of.
Yeah, that's very cool. I don't think our super secret agents have ever heard about this, so I think this is fascinating to them. So thank you for sharing about that. Okay, so let's see. Visualization scientist and emerging tech lead. Is that what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's what I do now. Essentially, it's just taking data in the universe and telling a really good story with it. It might be an image, it might be a 3D model, it might be a 3D print, it might be a virtual reality application of things like black holes, exploding stars, colliding galaxies, baby stars, and the like. It's all about taking that data and translating it into something else that can be usable for someone else.
And this is at the Center for Astrophysics, so it's Harvard and the Smithsonian.
Yep, yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so tell us about this NASA Chandra X-ray. This sounds really, really interesting.
Yeah, so the Chandra X Observatory is kind of like a sister telescope to the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope. You need a lot of different kinds of information when you're studying the universe. And different telescopes will look at different kinds of light. So you can think of, for example, if you've ever gone to the doctors and had to get an x-ray, or the dentist and had to get an x-ray, right? The doctor is using x-rays to be able to either look through your skin to the bone or to be able to look into your teeth for cavities. And so just like they use different kinds of light to understand things and to figure out problems, the same thing with astronomers. Astronomers have to detect different kinds of light that are out there in the universe in order to figure out what's going on. And so X-rays are one kind of light that are out there in the universe that scientists capture those X-rays using the Chandra X Observatory to be able to study things like exploding stars and colliding black holes and quasars and blazars and neutron stars and all these fun sounding objects.
That is really, really, really cool. Okay, so somehow in between all of this, you became a producer and a director, an award-winning producer and a director. So tell us about that. And I know that you did something with the PBS channel and BBC and Nova.
Yeah. Yeah, I never thought that any of those words would be in relation to me at some point when I grew up. Um, but I think I've developed skills to be able to tell stories, not just with scientific data, but also with words, with either words on a printed page or just through speaking. And so those skills have been really helpful in order to bring this NASA data from Chandra to all different kinds of people experiencing all different kinds of things. And so being a producer and a director is simply about directing that story in specific ways and to specific groups of people. Being on the BBC or on PBS shows like Nova or some of the other shows, it's just all about being open to being able to try to describe things that you're trying to understand, that some of your colleagues or other coworkers are researching, or just some of the questions that are out there that scientists in general are trying to answer. So I think at the end of the day, some of the skills that I've developed that have been the most useful in my career, besides coding, is just communicating, right? Learning how to tell stories with people in different ways, communicating with people of all different perspectives and different backgrounds, working with people who are blind or low vision, for example, to understand how they perceive data and what we can do to help make that understanding or awareness of data of the universe better, right? So it's just about storytelling and really making sure those stories that you're telling to specific groups of people are done with those groups of people in mind.
That's, like I said, super interesting. And I'm curious, like, I think our super secret agents would want to know too, like, what percentage of your time do you now devote to coding and all the other things that you're doing?
Well, first, I would say early on in my career, like 90% of my time was developed around coding. Astronomy runs on coding. A lot of different sciences run on coding these days, but astronomy in particular runs on coding. And so at first, that was a lot of my job. But now I've been doing this work for a very long time, 25 years. And so it's all about overseeing projects now. So a lot of my day-to-day stuff is more managing projects and figuring out what next steps might be, answering questions, finding new questions to ask, that sort of thing. So these days, I would say coding is probably down to like 5% of my time. I still need to understand it. And some of the old languages that I learned like a long time ago are now useful again, because JavaScript, for example, is very similar to some of the scripting that you can do in virtual reality applications development. So there's all of these really cool overlaps in this area. But I do a lot less coding, like actual coding. These days, I do more reading what other people are coding and trying to help them figure out the various issues and where to go next with it.
Yeah, you brought up another point. So VR and AR and any of those things, MR, like are you XR, are you using any of those in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so one of the cool breakthroughs that astronomy's had over the decades is this idea of being able to figure out which of the light is moving away from us and which of it it's moving towards us. Because we're here on Earth, and even the telescopes that we're working with that are up in space, they're not that far from us. So the universe kind of seems like a TV screen almost, right? A giant TV screen in the sky. And so being able to figure out the three-dimensionality of those objects in the universe is quite cool, but also challenging. You need to have a lot of good information to do it and some really good software and coding in order to do it. So being able to take those objects that have been rendered into 3D, 3 dimensions, and bring them into virtual reality has been really fun, because it's just another way to explore the universe. It's another way to learn about this data that we're capturing of the universe. And it's another way to bring the universe to other people as well, which I find pretty cool. So like students of mine have worked with us to be able to create these virtual reality applications. And it's a great learning tool, because if you're going to code something in virtual reality, you need to learn a lot about those ins and outs. So yeah, VR and AR and other kinds of newer technologies, other emerging technologies are really useful in jobs like mine.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so in the midst of this, the past 25 years, you've volunteered for like Fab Femmes and Dreamwalker, and also you've got a ton of awards. I think there's like pages and pages and speaking engagements. So tell us about how you're balancing all of this stuff.
I think two things. One, I have a short attention span. So I personally need to hop around to a lot of different things to feel engaged. It's like a spark that I need in my work life. And two, I have a very, very, very supportive family. My husband in particular, my mom, my mother-in-law before she passed away, were all super, super supportive and helpful when I was raising kids and trying to figure out how to finish a degree and wanting to write a book. They were just the backbone to everything. So I think it's just figuring out what you want to do and how you're going to do it is really important. And if you're really passionate about something, you'll make the time. You know, if you're really passionate about sharing the wonders of the universe with other people, volunteering, it doesn't feel like a chore. Doing talks, they don't feel like a chore. I get energy from those types of events, from these type of events. I get a lot of energy from interacting with other people, breaking myself away from the computer screen. Ironic, since we're talking through a computer screen, I know. But being able to like break away from an email and a text and all that and just sit down and talk with someone, I think to me, that's energizing. And I tend to learn something from the questions that are being asked. So I really like these kinds of sit downs.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting to hear about other people's journeys, especially in the STEM space, especially as a woman going through the motions and like the coding thing I'm still stuck on because I always talk about it and I feel like there's not enough of us. So this is the reason, another reason why we're doing all this. So thank you for being so raw and honest and sharing everything. Okay, so you brought up publications and books. You were the co-author for Ticket to the Universe, From Earth to the Universe, and let's see, Stars in Your Handbook. I think I missed one of them. Something from the Spectrum and Beyond.
Yep, I've written about, I think, 8 books so far. A couple kids' books and a bunch of like general audience books, because it goes back to me always wanting to try something new. And I've always loved writing since I was a very young kid. I used to write stories. I used to write little like fables and fairy tales. I specifically remember in like 5th grade creating this little fairy tale about where rain came from, and finding old wallpaper that my parents had from when they built the house and like covering it in this silver wallpaper so I could save the story forever. I've just always loved books, and the idea of writing a book was very exciting for me. So when I got the opportunity to do that with my co-author Megan Watsky, who's been my science bestie for many many years, I just jumped at the chance and haven't looked back. And it goes back to that same theme that we talked about earlier, just being able to break down a topic and to story tell it in a way that makes sense, that keeps all the trueness of that information, but makes sense for who is either reading it or consuming it or, you know, learning from it.
That's so cool. All right, so the children's books now. So Goodnight, Exo Moon, and An Alien Helped Me with My Homework.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, Goodnight Exo Moon was actually a book that I wrote for my kids when they were babies. Like, I think my son was 4, my daughter was 2, maybe. We were on a long car ride and they were just feeling salty back there. And I just wanted to, like, I don't know, riff off of Goodnight Moon, which I had read, I think, 100 times by that point in the car ride. And so I wrote this little story for them right there in the car and tucked it away in a drawer, and, well, a digital drawer because I put it on my computer. And then didn't really think about it. And then a few years ago, a colleague at the Smithsonian said, "Oh, do you have any kids' books?" And I was like, "Oh, I did write something a long time ago." And so I just donated it to the Smithsonian, and they ended up publishing it with a partner company. And I just thought that was really fun because this idea of exomoons, which are moons around other planets beyond our solar system, was a bit of a fairy tale at first, but there has since been at least one paper with a possible detection of an exomoon in another system. It was never confirmed, and who knows if it's actually one, but just to be at the point where people are studying that and thinking they're finding them and hoping they're finding them was very exciting. So it seemed like the right time to yeah, launch that story out into the world.
interesting. I'm curious, like, how did your kids react when you read them the story for the first
Well,
time?
they were very little. They probably thought I was just being very weird. um, but they know that I published the book kind of in their honor, and they both have a copy of it. And I kind of love that because my son is now in college and my daughter is heading to college next year. So it's like just a fun little connection that I have with my kids through that book that I think I will always love.
Very cute. That's awesome. Okay, so the next one, An Alien Helped Me with My Homework. How did that happen?
Yeah, that came about because the woman who oversaw my PhD, she's my PhD advisor, Dr. Lisa Smith. Um, she had always wanted to write a children's book too, so she had some lovely ideas, and we just sat down and worked our way through it, and just kind of created this concept of a couple kids who are doing some homework and come upon an alien who needs to do her own homework, and just this little interaction between them, and they learn about things like black holes as they're going through this little journey. And it was just a fun, sweet story to be able to work on. So I think that's kind of the joy in science, when you get to have moments of just having some fun with the content and with the ideas, and using your imagination in a completely different way than what your day job is.
Absolutely. As someone that comes from the kid space and working on Barbie and Bratz, like, this stuff is like fascinating to me, and I think it's much needed in the world. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so you did a TEDx talk, How to Hold a Dead Star in Your Hands. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the 3D modeling that I think I mentioned a bit earlier is all about figuring out these objects in our universe that are very dimensional and dynamic. They're always changing, and being able to capture that information in 3D is tough. But once you have that 3D information, you can do any number of things with it. So you have a 3D file, you can learn how to 3D print. You have a 3D file, you can bring it into virtual reality. You have a 3D file, you can bring it into a hologram, right? There are all of these opportunities to be able to work with that 3D file. And so some colleagues of mine at the Smithsonian were in the process of 3D scanning and 3D printing President Obama's head when I first came across this 3D model of an exploded star called Cassiopeia A. And I was kind of like, well, if they can do that, surely we can figure out how to 3D print this supernova remnant, this exploded star. And so we got some tips from them, some tricks on how to do it. We failed miserably a few times trying to get it done. And then a couple of my team members figured it out, and we produced this lovely little version of a 3D model of an exploded star that you can hold in your hand. Now, the thing is, of course, this object in real life is huge. It's like 40 million billion times the surface area of our sun. It's
Wow.
huge. You could never hold it in your hand, right? But being able to hold a tiny, tiny, tiny version of it in your hand does give you certain benefits. And one of those, particularly if you're blind or low vision, it's a way to tactilely explore, to explore with your hands, something that you might not have access to in other ways. And that for me was a real inspiring moment, like being able to work with students at the National Federation of the Blind who were exploring this object, Cassiopeia A, and others like it that we had worked on, and showing us how useful they were and how to improve them, how to make them better, was just one of the coolest things that I'd gotten the pleasure to work on. And I've never looked back since then. That's been a priority. The community of people who are blind or low vision has been a priority for me for a very long time. And being able to 3D model and 3D print is a really lovely way to work with that community.
That's true. Actually, I read somewhere that you are the pioneer for 3D imaging. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's just about trying new things. See, I'm not afraid to fail, I guess, because I have done it plenty of times. And so I'd say one of my superpowers is that because I like to learn so much and I like to read a lot, I'm always like sucking up little bits of information like a vacuum cleaner. And then what that does is in my head, all of that information kind of settles down, the dust kind of scatters, and my brain figures out ways to connect these things. That's definitely what I think of as my superpower. And so I can make these guesses, I guess, these leaps on, well, if we have this, we could try this. Or if we have this in this form, we could move it to this form and see what happens. Or just asking the question, what will happen if we try this? And I have good instincts because one of my superpowers is collecting all of those different bits of information and, muddling them around inside my head. And so with something like 3D imaging and 3D printing and virtual reality applications for astrophysics, like all of those different things that I've tried is just because I sat there and tried to learn a lot about a whole bunch of different things that probably didn't seem to make sense to other people at one time. But in my brain was slowly trying to make sense of it. And you know what I think at the end of the day that is all about is just giving myself room to play. I think having room to play in your work is really, really important. And I don't mean like play, like just go play in the play yard, but like just try something, take a break from writing a report or take a break from coding, whatever it is you're doing, and just try something completely different. Take a chance on doing something that maybe no one else has done, and, do your research. You want to be reading things. You want to be learning things. You want to be talking to other people. None of these things that I've been working on have happened in isolation. None of these things is a me thing. All of these things are we things because I am learning from other people around me. I'm absorbing what they're saying. I'm asking them questions. I'm reading what somebody else wrote. I'm learning some new language that somebody wrote, right? It's all of these different places to get more information. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I don't know that I'm ever comfortable claiming to be experts in things exactly, but just that I like to allow myself and my whole team time to play and figure new things out.
Yeah, that's so important. I think the inner child is always happier when you're playing more. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's interesting that you brought up the superpower because one of the students wrote a question. What superpower do you find that you have that pushed you to where you are today?
Oh, yeah. Learning is my superpower. That's honestly the best answer I can give because I don't hesitate to learn something in a completely different field that I have no information about. I don't mind sounding ignorant if I ask questions that might sound, not super smart to some people because I'm asking questions in a completely different field. I don't mind failing, right? Because I'm doing all of that in the idea of learning more and hopefully at some point succeeding in something. So I think, yeah, learning is my superpower. I just enjoy it so much. And it's led me to some very cool places. It's brought me to a team of people that also like to learn and try new things and don't mind being pushed a bit into new areas. And that is a very, very satisfying kind of place to work. It's very satisfying and fun when the people around you are also learning and engaged and don't mind taking some risks with you. That's pretty fun at the end of the day.
It sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, so during this time, and I don't remember what year that was, you were the change maker for the White House. So tell us about that.
Yeah, that was cool. There was the United State of Women organization that was having an event with the White House. I think that was in 2016.
I was there actually.
And
Yeah,
oh, were you?
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Um, and so they were taking nominations for change makers, and I was one of them. I don't know how many there were total. But we all got to go to this event in DC, and I love DC. I
so
love
fun.
going down to DC. I go there as much as I can. And yeah, so you were there. We were in this room with like the president, President Obama, and the first lady, and the soon to be President Biden, and Oprah Winfrey, and all of these people that had done such amazing things. And I was kind of like, why am I here? Like, it was just such a pinch me moment to be in the same room as multiple presidents and all of these people, different actresses that had just done such cool things. And yeah, that was a very fun event. It was very, very exciting to just get to hear from some of these people that I had admired for a while directly, to hear, to be in the same room with them. I was very, very happy with that experience. I'm sure you were too.
Yeah, it's wild because I feel like we had a sliding doors moment because I was there. I posted pictures on Instagram. So if you look at my Instagram, you'll see pictures.
Yeah, me too. Oh gosh, yeah.
And like that was 2016. So I think like everything like after COVID got a little blurry. So I totally forgot about that. I didn't realize they did the change makers at that event. So that's wild.
Yeah, it was a really exciting event to be a part of because again, you're just hearing all these amazing ideas and you're listening to people who want to empower others, who want to make changes for the better for women and girls. And that was really, it was really, really lovely to be included in that in any way, shape, or form. Definitely memories I treasure. And I was just thinking of it this today, like earlier this morning for some reason. So it's so funny that you actually brought that up. I don't know, besides today, I haven't thought about it in ages, and now I've thought about it twice in one day.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I said, everything pre-COVID is kind of blurry.
It is.
And like I feel like they didn't never had that event again because I was working with the President Obama for a while, and like after, it just was like a kind of like a once in a lifetime thing.
It did feel once in a lifetime, which is kind of sad in a way, but you know, I understand.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that was a lot of work, but we got so much out of it. Very
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so I'm going to switch to some student questions, and then we'll go back to some other. Okay, so this is a comment and a question. Role models are real life superheroes. You are a real life superhero. Have you had someone who inspired you in your STEM journey? And how did their encouragement help you become even more awesome?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you. That's so sweet. I don't really consider myself that, but I love that. But honestly, my first superhero is definitely my mom. I actually have to tell her this story someday because I don't think she's ever heard me talk about it. But when my mom was younger, she graduated high school, went to work in a factory, and then got married, had my brother and myself. And she was waitressing. My dad was working in a different factory at this point, and ends were tight, money was tight. And I remember being a little kid. I must have been maybe 6, maybe 7, sitting underneath the dining room table because she was going to night school to become like a nurse's assistant, an assistant nurse. They call them different things, nurse's aide. Um, And she took me to college with her. Well, it was night school. She took me to night school with her a couple of times. And I just remember thinking she was the coolest thing because she had this big biology book she had open on the dining room table with all these like gross illustrations. It was an anatomy book. And I was like, this is amazing. I want to be like my mom. And she did. She became an assistant nurse and helped people for the next however many years until she retired, I guess like 30 years or longer perhaps. And I just thought she was the coolest thing. So she was really the first person that I was aware of learning, right? Learning at all different stages in life. She had 2 kids. She had to waitress during the day, come home, study at night, go to classes at night, like all of these things. And that she could balance all that and like go on to help all these people. I just thought that was the best. And then my other superhero would be the person who hired me, Kathy Listician. She was someone who worked in like the military complex in the 70s, at a time when it was very difficult to be a woman. It was like the time where it was, go get me a coffee kind of thing. And so she had these experiences and wanted to make sure her team never had those experiences. And so she brought me into her team, and it was a very heavily female team. And I just always felt comfortable because she gave me space to do what I needed to do. I knew she would always have my back. And that's probably one of like the biggest life lessons that I learned. Like when you're going for a job, yes, the job should be something that interests you, but it's the people that you're going to work with that really, really matter. Having someone as a boss or as a colleague or a very close employee that you're going to be working with a lot, and understanding if you're on the same wavelength, so to speak, was a very critical moment. And I've tried to do that same exact thing for any person I've ever hired since, because she gave me the perfect first job experience. And I try to replicate that as much as possible to give other people the opportunity to have space to breathe, space to play, never feel looked down upon or put upon. And yeah, she would be my second superhero if I can have 2. I'll be greedy.
Have as many as you want. Okay, so next student question. Can you tell us what astronomy visualization is and what your job entails?
Yeah. Astronomy visualization at the end of the day is taking data of something in our universe, an exploded star, a galaxy, a stellar nursery, and creating that data, turning it into an image or a 3D model or something else. So it's all about taking data that we can't see naturally with human eyes, right? So with the telescope that I work for, the Chandrax Observatory, it's looking in X-ray light, which humans can't see naturally. Humans can't naturally detect that with our eyes because our eyes only see an optical or visible light. So we have to create a spacecraft that can capture all of that X-ray goodness, all that exciting stuff, and then bring it back down to Earth and translate it from the binary code suitcase that it's captured in or carried down in, and then open that suitcase and unpack it into something that we can then represent as an image or as a 3D model, for example. So at the end of the day, astronomy visualization is just storytelling in either a visual or an audio or a tactile kind of way.
Very cool. Okay, I think I can see how you got into like producing and directing as well. And tell us if you have any projects in those realms now as well.
I do. I have some fun things going on that I actually can't yet talk about, but if they finish up soon, I'll send a link. But yeah, I've had some. I don't know. I think I've just had a lot of really good luck connecting with different people in very different industries, different kinds of areas, and being able to work with people in many different kinds of areas just really gets like the creative juices flowing. And so some of the work that I do in directing and producing and writing and all of that is in very, very exciting areas for me. But yeah, I don't know if that helps, but that's, yeah.
Okay, no, we totally understand and we're excited. And maybe when we go live officially on Apple and Spotify, those will be ready. So We can put them in
That
the
would be
show.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of advice do you have for us students who want to learn about visualization?
I think my first piece of advice is to learn coding in some form, because so much of what you can do, coding is like a really great tool in your tool belt, right? It just lets you have so much control over the information. It really lets you move the information into these new ways. So being able to code so that you can create an image, you can create a 3D model, or you could go into something like sound or virtual reality or whatever it is that you're interested in, is very, very, very helpful. But also, I would say learning how to communicate is also just as important, because visualizing something or vivifying something, if it's not just a visual, is all about really at the end of the day communicating. You could be communicating with other scientists, you could be communicating with teachers and students, you could be communicating with your parents, you could be communicating with a member of Congress, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, taking information and moving into another form is just about communicating. So being able to understand how people communicate, how to improve your own communication skills is really, really useful. So all of those, English classes or other, whatever language that you're learning, those classes are very, very helpful in so many different science and technology and engineering and math fields that I think I'm surprised at how much those skills are useful in my job on a day-to-day basis.
That's so true. I think it's all connected somehow. And I always have that Steve Jobs commencement speech in my head when he talks about connecting the dots about like calligraphy and Japanese. He was just kind of doing it for fun, but all of these bricks led to Apple being what it is today. So,
Exactly. And you
yeah.
never know which one of those bricks is going to lay the foundation, right? You just never know. So, yeah, you might think learning how to play the harp or playing soccer or learning how to fence or whatever it is you're interested in seems completely unrelated, but you can learn so many useful skills doing those very different interesting things, and they are all different kinds of possible bricks that you can lay to create something really, really cool.
So, so true. Okay. On that note, what did you learn when you were 11 years old that you have kept with you today?
11. So let's see. That would have been sixth grade for me. Oh, so in sixth grade, I had this English teacher, who really pushed us, and we had to read some pretty challenging things. But what she allowed us to do was to like artify our understandings of those pieces of literature. And so one of the things that I was reading, I created like a scratch and sniff book about it. I think it was Queen Elizabeth. It was something that we were reading on Queen Elizabeth. And so one of my best friends at the time, she and I made this like fashion magazine about Queen Elizabeth. And we had a scratch and sniff section about like the powder they would have used. And we had like the makeup that she would have worn, because it was very interesting how very unhealthy the things they used to put on their skin were for them, and just about how she used to like use fashion and makeup as a way to really express her royalness, her prominence, her importance, and all of that. And I love the fact that that teacher let us play in that class, right? That we didn't write a report. Instead, we had to show what we learned in a completely different way. There was another time that my friend and I did a baton dance, kind of showing the the battle, one of the battles in a Greek mythology piece. And again, sounds so strange, but we had to map out parts of the battle with our dance using our batons, and we had music selected. And it seems so weird, perhaps, but that teacher just gave me such an outlet for connecting the things that we were doing with the things that I enjoyed. And I think I took that lesson with me and ran with it, because I have always treated my work in that way, right? I've always looked for the weird bit of connective tissue that might bring me to something completely random. And I think it's one of the reasons why I appreciate play in my job so much today, because she set that early example of how you could play in a really meaningful way. Because again, you have to learn a lot. Like if you're going to make a whole magazine on Elizabethan times, right? You have to learn a lot about what they wore, what they did on their face, what they did with their hair, all of these things. And you learn about the history of why they were doing that, right? And it was a really fun lesson to learn that you could have a good time trying to learn something about history and Queen Elizabeth in particular.
That's really cool. We would love to see that. Is it still around?
No, I don't think so. At least my parents moved quite a few times. And so I've kind of lost all of my old artifacts of these strange projects that I used to do, but I wish I still had them. So it's kind of a bummer.
But I'm sure you've come up with some really cool things ever since. So that's, I guess,
Yeah.
it was the path. Okay, so looking into the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road? And how can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
Mm. I can just see that there are so many questions yet to be asked, right? Like, it's not my generation that's going to go land on Mars at some point. It's this next generation that's going to get to land on Mars or to build a moon habitat using 3D printer and lunar dust. And I just love that there's all that potential. It's not, my generation that's going to delve even deeper into finding new worlds and perhaps the first sign of life elsewhere. It's going to be this next generation that gets to do all of these incredible, exciting things. And so I think I would just wish for everybody to take those ideas of learning and play with them as they sail out to these new worlds, whether it's just the moon or whether it's Mars or whether it's, learning about worlds that are habitable where there might be perhaps be signs of life far, far away from here. I think it's really all about asking what those next questions are, right? Like what are the things that we don't even know to ask yet? And that is so great that there's so much of that for this generation of students to figure out. Just what are those questions?
That's so, so true. On that note, what advice would you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
I guess for advice would be, maybe it seems a bit trite or overdone, but to find things you really enjoy doing, because it makes my day go so fast when I'm working on something and I'm just really enjoying it. And I did not grow up saying I am going to be a data visualization scientist for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. I didn't know any of those things even existed. I didn't know X-rays were used to study the universe. I didn't even know there was a thing as visualization science. I had no idea about any of this. And if you ask me right now what I'm going to be when I grow up, I still won't have an answer for you, right? So I think it's just that idea of being able to just keep open to things that you like, find where you can connect the dots, and just kind of keep asking, where can I help? Where can I add to the story? Where can I find the better question? Where can I save the world? I'm not saving the world today, but I love the fact that where my journey has taken me here to today is I have definitely impacted a lot of people. And it's not what I thought I would be doing. But I've had such a fun ride getting here and hopefully still have quite a ride to do.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, how can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Is it Instagram, your website, LinkedIn? What's the best way?
I do try to stay on Instagram. I'm not the best of social media these days, but I do try to stay on Instagram, and I do try to update my website occasionally too. So either of those I think would be decent options. If something major is going on, I will definitely post it to my website and I will definitely post it to Instagram. So
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to switch now to our 60-second questions, and then we'll do key takeaways. All right, so what was your favorite toy growing up?
I had a little plastic space shuttle, ironically, and I used to fly it around with my Care Bears. My absolute favorite. Loved it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Ironic considering where I ended up, but yes.
Yeah, oh my God, I just got chills. I feel like that was definitely meant to be. It was like your destiny.
Yep.
Care Bears, I'm curious about, and honestly, that's funny because I didn't work for that company, but I worked for the other one. So,
I
and
was obsessed with Care Bears. I
yeah,
loved the Care Bears.
I think that was Hasbro. I have to go back and check, but I
Yeah.
like Rhode Island was Hasbro, and I was like, I'm from LA, I'm not moving to Rhode Island. So,
I live in Rhode Island, so it must have been the local connection to Care Bears.
yeah, wild. Okay, favorite video game.
Oh, so I probably have to say Super Mario Brothers. It's a classic. I was tempted to say Tetris, but no, I think I have to go with, yeah, Super Mario Brothers because it's just such a classic and it's just a fun little adventure game. I love it.
Yeah, totally. I was obsessed. Did you watch the movie recently?
I haven't yet, but I really do want to see it because Jack Black is like one of my favorites. So he's just so funny. So
It's so
that's
fun.
on my list.
Yeah, it's really fun. You should definitely see that. And also the Tetris movie is on Apple. You should see that too. It's really,
Oh, I will definitely. I still
really
haven't
good.
even seen the Barbie movie, so I'm really behind on movies that I have to watch.
Okay, when you see that, we'll have to talk about it because I worked there 20 years ago, literally, and just wild. We have a lot to discuss after you watch that.
It looks so interesting, so I'd love to chat about it.
Yeah, I won't say anything, but yeah.
All right, good.
All right. Okay, favorite superhero.
I'd probably say Wonder Woman. Linda Carter. I used to watch reruns when I was like homesick from school, and I just adored her. So yeah, Wonder Woman all the way.
Same. Yeah, same. Obviously, you can tell like I've got my Wonder Woman things going on. So.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
Yeah, Linda Carter was the jam back in the days. I mean that. So good. Yeah, I mean the movie with the original movie, I thought was good too. But the original,
I did like the first. Yeah, I did like the first movie with Gal Gadot, right?
Yeah,
yeah, that was good too.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, how about favorite animated series or show? Also, growing up as a child.
Smurfs. I don't even need a second to think of Smurfs. I used to play Smurfs. I used to want to be Smurfette. I bought my kids Smurf stuff when they were young because I was obsessed. Smurfs.
Yeah, we're definitely from the same generation. But those Jetsons was like my favorite too. Like
yeah, I heard the 80s.
Yeah. Okay, any shows that you're watching now?
Oh gosh, no. I'm not a huge TV person, to be honest. I can't think of anything that I'm watching. I did watch Peaky Blinders with my husband, but then I got sick of it. I tend to get sick of TV shows, so there's nothing that I'm watching right now, unfortunately.
And how about any favorite movies?
Favorite movies. Oh, well, there is a BBC version of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen that I absolutely adore. It's technically a TV show because it was done a long time ago, I think in the 90s. But I've watched it 100 times. So I would have to say that. Cool. So I guess that goes back to a TV show technically.
Nice. All right. So let's do key takeaways and please let us know if we missed anything and feel free to chime in. Okay. So collect different experiences to see how you can build up from there. Be eager to learn more in the things you're interested in. Practice to reach the skill level you want. Energize yourself by sitting down and talking to someone. Find what you're curious and pursue it. Try something different. Be comfortable with researching and asking questions. Look up to your role models. Understand how to communicate. Find things that you really enjoy doing.
Yep. I think the only thing else I would say is to play, which is kind of wrapped up in some of those, but I would want to underline it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and your journey with us, Kim. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
And we're so grateful to have you at WhizGirls Academy, and our super secret agents are going to be super ecstatic to listen to this and we'll probably reach out to you. So thank you again for your time today, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you, super secret agents.
Thanks.
Bye.